Welcome to worship in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte.
The Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte.
Unitarian, it is a religious word with a long history.
Unitarian. It is a religious path with a wide scope, rooted in people and places far from here who still today assemble, calling themselves by this name.
Unitarian, its truest meaning resides neither in sacred texts nor in shared beliefs, but in committed souls and in social commitments.
Today, we gather symbolically with our religious siblings the world around, marking a moment in our shared history.
Today, we join with them symbolically.
In singing of our honorable past.
In singing of love and of freedom.
In singing of reformers and pioneers.
In intoning our common quest for life's immortal good.
To all here who know themselves to be Unitarian, and to all others who join with us here today, welcome. One sun rose on us today. One light will kindle the flaming chalices of congregations from east to west. As we receive the torch of this liberating faith, a gift from our religious ancestors, let our hearts burn with the fire of commitment, and let every soul be free.
I was delighted on a Sunday late last summer to look out in the congregation and to recognize my colleague, the Reverend Jennifer Rue. Jennifer and I overlapped in our time at the Starking School for the Ministry, our Unitarian Universalist Seminary in Berkeley, California. As it turns out, Jennifer is here in Charlotte for a year, a one-year residency. She is serving as the chaplain for the Levine Cancer Institute. I knew Jennifer as the longtime minister of our Unitarian Universalist congregation in Williamsburg, Virginia. So I was delighted to make this reconnection, and I have talked her into doing a service with me today. It's been such a treat to plan and to lead with a colleague whom I respect as I do Jennifer. Jennifer was born in Seoul. She was raised in Toledo, grew up, she says, in Baltimore, went to seminary in Berkeley, and is now finding her place in the Carolinas as an Asian American Southerner. Jennifer, welcome. Delighted to have you here. So for our first reading, I have to appeal to your trust. This, we hope, will make more sense by 12:15 or 12:25. There's one word I will explain in this very odd reading. It is the word diet. It has absolutely nothing to do with nutrition. Diet, in the context of this reading, is a word used to describe a religious assembly. So when you hear diet, don't hear counting calories. Think about a bunch of religious folks coming together. This is an edict that was handed down in 1568 by King John Sigismund. His edict was this: His Majesty our Lord, in what manner he, together with his realm, legislated in the matter of religion at the previous diets, In the same manner now, in this diet, reaffirms that in every place the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to their understanding of it, and if the congregation like it, well. Okay? On the off chance, no, he didn't say that. Actually, he simply said, if not, the congregation doesn't like it, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. But they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. This edict makes people in my business nervous. I like this part, however. Listen closely. Therefore, none of the superintendents or others shall abuse the preachers. None of the superintendents or others, any others, members, visitors, people that are beginning to wonder why they came today, shall not abuse the preachers, says the king. No one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone, according to the previous statutes. And it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from their post for their teaching. For faith is the gift of God, and this comes from hearing, which hearing is by the word of God. Brent Dow and Trevor McNaughton of the Jamaican reggae group, the Melodians, co-wrote the classic Rastafarian anthem, Rivers of Babylon, in 1970. Since that time, Rivers of Babylon has been recorded by an astoundingly wide range of artists. Jimmy Cliff, Sinead O'Connor, Steve Earle, the Neville Brothers, and as it turns out, a lot of really bad YouTube renditions. It even appears as number 1042 in our teal hymnal. Now almost 50 years old, Rivers of Babylon is a remarkably recognizable song, especially considering the source for its lyrics. Dow and McNaughton turned to an ancient Hebrew scripture psalm for their text, altering certain words to make it explicitly Rastafarian. How, their song asks, how can we sing King Alpha's song? The biblical text says, God's song in a strange land. Behind that pained, poignant question, one raised in the biblical account by refugees carried away to Babylon, is primitive theological thinking. Gods and goddesses for our primeval forebears were geographically defined. The rulers of nations determined their divinities. The Jews themselves experienced this when their kings, David and Solomon, established Israel's national religion by claiming occupied territory in Jerusalem for their holy city and building a temple there. It demonstrated the unmistakable melding of power in an explicitly theocratic regime. And yet, for all of that power, these ancients suspected that outside of the national borders, their local deities would be of little value. Their captors may call for a song, but how can we sing one of our God's songs in a strange land? Our God is nowhere to be found here. There's no God to hear our songs. Late medieval Europe had not advanced much in its theological thinking. They were directly in the lineage of the Roman Emperor Constantine, whose dramatic personal conversion to Christianity determined in one mystical moment the religious fate for the entire empire. Christianity of a particular sort, centered in Rome, was still dominant and was still appropriated in service to the political order. All other religious variations were regarded not just as heretical, but as threats to the state. So, for example, when Ferdinand and Isabella ascend to the Spanish throne, they immediately embark upon a vicious purge, banishing Muslims and Jews from the land. It's also important to remember that this same impulse motivates them to fund the inexplicably still celebrated colonizer Christopher Columbus in claiming both land and converts by the force of the sword. Even as the European continent is being fractured by the Protestant Reformation, political and religious power remain linked. Royals and nobles determined for their subjects the particular tradition that they would follow. Power still coalesced to maintain order. However, for all of this force, the world's, and more particular for our purposes today, our own religious history is marked also by heretics. These were those whose faith-filled devotion could be neither defined nor constrained by the power of the state. One such heretic within our liberating religious movement was a Hungarian preacher named Francis David from 16th century Transylvania. He was born at a time when and into a place where the threat of losing their national religion and thus of disunity was great. Born a Catholic, he renounced Catholicism and became a Lutheran minister. He renounced his Lutheranism and became a Calvinist. And at last, he renounced Calvinism and converted to a new movement gaining traction in Eastern Europe called Unitarianism. Meanwhile, the national animosity persisted. The religious schism grew. Knowing the deep peril, the region's young king, John Sigismund, called a special religious assembly, all that diet stuff you heard earlier, in early 1568 in hopes of resolving the controversy. Our Unitarian forebear, Francis David, would play a significant role. Influenced largely by David's preaching, the king was inspired to issue the edict that you heard read earlier. While not especially remarkable to us, in its time, it was a truly radical statement. The king would not determine the religious course for his people. In fact, there should be no coercion from anyone. No one shall be reviled for their religion. With this, the possibility for religious pluralism is created. Order need not be maintained by some coercive notion of spiritual unity. Religion is disentangled from the political authority, not, please notice this, religion is disentangled from the political authority, not because politics is too important to be tainted by religion, but just the opposite. Religion matters too much to be dictated by force of any kind. Faith isn't about keeping the social order. Faith is about engaging with the deepest truths in life, both as individuals and as communities of like-minded people. There would be no national religion. Each tradition would make its own case, and the people in each congregation would determine their own course. King Sigismund, for his part, made his own choice. Convinced by Francis David, he became the first and the only Unitarian king in history. Unitarianism was declared a viable option, not as the path that the nation had to follow, but as one acceptable path alongside others. Now, we should not overplay this incident. Sigismund's edict adjudicated between Christian sects. It wasn't sanctioning exploration into the world's religions or expressing the full breadth of religious freedom. But in religion's long history, it was a moment when religious freedom found new expression, laying a foundation for a more expansive freedom to come. And at a time when people were being killed for not believing as the nation's ruler believed, Transylvania became a temporary place of tolerance, accepting the possibility of a new order of things in which all songs could be sung in all places. Sadly, it would not last. King John Sigismund would soon die at the age of 30. The controversy flared. Francis David would be arrested for heresy and would die a martyr's death in a dungeon cell. Nonetheless, we join today with Unitarians around the world in celebrating the Edict of Torda on its 450th anniversary. We do so in times in which questions of how power will be used to keep order and of what religious freedom really means are prevalent in our own nation. Today, we reclaim our spiritual birthright, recognizing religion's rightful role in relationship to political power. Today, mindful of our historic lineage, we recognize anew that religion matters too much to be tainted by politics. And the religious conscience is too important to be coerced by any form of power. Tempted though we have been at times to bolster our own case by appealing to powerful people who we claim favored this tradition, we must recognize anew that neither our history nor our current mission is enhanced by the approval of those in power. Kings, presidents, the rich, the famous, the noble, or the noteworthy. We must look with unrelenting suspicion at all efforts to align political power with religion, recognizing that religion usually gets subverted and manipulated in such relationships. Those of you who know me well know how hard I am biting my tongue this morning. Religion usually gets subverted and manipulated when it aligns with political power. Just ask Reverend Graham. Let us sing anew our own song in this increasingly strange land. Let us now sing anew of resistance, of our refusal to accept the current order of things. In our deep belief in the necessity of transformation. May our song be forever the song of freedom.
hear these words from the Reverend Howard Thurman. During much of my boyhood, I cared for my grandmother, who was born a slave and lived until the Civil War on a plantation near Madison, Florida. My regular chore was to do all of the reading for my grandmother, for she could neither read nor write. I was deeply impressed by the fact that she was most particular about the choice of scripture that she wanted. For instance, I might read many more of the scriptures, the devotional psalms, and some of the gospels, but the Pauline epistles, never. My curiosity knew no bounds, but we did not question her about anything. When I was older and halfway through college, I chanced to be spending a few days home during the summer break. With a feeling of great temerity, I asked her one day why it was that she would not let me read from the Pauline letters. What she told me, I shall never forget. During the days of slavery, she said, the master's minister would occasionally hold services for the slaves. Old man McGee was so mean he would not let a Negro minister preach to his slaves. All the while, the minister used as his text something from Paul. At least 3 or 4 times a year, he used this as his text. Slaves, be obedient to them that are your masters, as unto Christ. Then he would go on to show how it was God's will that they were slaves, and how if they were good and happy, God would bless us. I promised my Maker that if I ever learned to read, or if freedom ever came, I would not read that part of the Bible. I tell this story about Howard Thurman's grandmother because I just love how powerful of a theologian she is. Her soul would not be satisfied by the false teachings that she heard. And though her body was in bondage, she exercised a true spiritual freedom that would become her legacy for her grandson. He would use that spiritual freedom to build the first multiracial church in America. He would use that spiritual freedom to carry Gandhi's message of nonviolence to the civil rights movement. Spiritual freedom. That's what I want to explore with you today. The Reformation pioneered the principles of religious freedom, and that made way for a spiritual freedom. That's when ordinary people started to listen to the voice of the indwelling God rather than the voice of some church authority. Centuries later, here we are, one of the many, many branches off of that Reformation tree. Now, whether you received the gift of this free faith from your parents or grandparents, or like me, you just happened to stumble upon a UU church while walking to work one day, you have inherited this bundle of history and tradition and ideology. You are free. You are free from having to pass any sort of creedal test before you're allowed to be a member. You are free from a church hierarchy that would send you a minister that maybe you don't like. You are free from being compelled to give 10% of your income to this congregation. You can make meaning out of the world out there and understand the inner workings in here in any way that is meaningful to you. This freedom is our inheritance. It is a gift of immeasurable value. And so I want to ask you today, what shall we do with that gift? What could we do with this gift? So I could have just walked past that big white church in Baltimore as I was walking to work that day, because frankly, I had never heard the word Unitarian before in my whole life, and I didn't know what it was. And I would have kept walking, except that there was this poster hanging on the church advertising a drag show that was coming to the church fellowship. And I thought, I've got to see what's going on in there. So the following Sunday, I made my way through those big, heavy wooden doors. I think I must have been 25 or 26 years old, and I had not been to church in a very, very long time. I had grown up a dutiful Korean Presbyterian as a child, but I no longer believed what they wanted me to believe. And I sort of made peace with the idea that maybe I'll never go to church again. That day, in that Unitarian church, I sat in the back row next to the door, and I looked up, and above the altar, there was this colorful array of religious symbols from around the world. There was a Jewish Star of David, there was the Muslim crescent, there was a Hindu Om, a Buddhist wheel, and I felt satisfied. I was finally free. I was finally free from having to speak words that didn't make any sense to me anymore. I was free to explore and believe the things that were really meaningful to me. And I was also free of this image that I had of what a minister is supposed to look like. That morning, as the Reverend Dr. Janet Newman took her place at the pulpit, that image of the male-only preacher just fell away, thankfully. I quickly joined that congregation and then signed up for 3 committees. I drank in all of this freedom and just cherished every minute of it. I became an avid seeker. I was kind of like the honeybee going from flower to flower, and I would go to pagan rituals and studied Zen Buddhism and studied Celtic spirituality, and then went off to Sufi mysticism, and then returned to Buddhism, but this time Shambhala Buddhism. I was having a great time, and I would characterize that time in my life as the adolescence of my spiritual journey. And I took all of the freedom offered by my newfound UU faith, and I loved it. I loved it deeply. It reminds me kind of my stepdaughter who went off to college this fall. All she wanted was to be free. That was her single focus, just get me out of South Carolina and, and away from my parents. And while she is enjoying this freedom right now, I know that at some point she's going to have to think about what she might want to make of this freedom. So yes, it is possible to come here to church and be a part of this congregation, maybe for years and years and years, without letting it lay claim to your life. It is possible to come here and enjoy the bounty of classes and workshops, watch the films, read the books, have endless discussions about them without having this faith lay claim to your life. But I tell you that there is a responsibility and there is an obligation required by all kinds of freedom, including spiritual freedom. We who are the beneficiaries of this faith are called to be more than just consumers of this faith. We are called to do more than just enjoy and celebrate, because freedom is not an end in itself, and spiritual freedom especially is an obligation. And I say that spiritual freedom is an obligation to satisfy your soul. So let me stop here and talk about that word soul. When I talk about soul, I mean deep self, right? Your truest self. It is the spark of the divine or the echo of God that dwells within. And the idea of a satisfied soul, well, you heard that in the edict that Jay read earlier. And it comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, where King Solomon is described as a man of incredible wealth and power, and yet his soul is not satisfied. The Irish poet John O'Donohue also talks about soul satisfaction when he says, if we become addict to the external, the interior will haunt us. We will become hungry with a hunger no image, no person, no deed can still. In other words, the soul will not be satisfied by anything in the material world. It may not even be satisfied by you coming to church or volunteering at the shelter, because even some of the best social justice work can leave our souls hungry if the reason we're doing it is to please the external rather than the internal. So let me ask you this. What is the deep longing in your soul? What do you really want? What do you really, really want? Not in the way that Amazon asks you what you want or tells you what you want, but that deep longing, the deep longing. I believe that the deeper we reach for that question, the more universal the answer. Perhaps your deep, deep longing is for compassion to bind all of us together. Maybe your deep longing is to love one another, to be able to see the spark of the divine in other people. Is your deep longing to find beauty in every corner of the city? Does your soul want you to be able to speak the truth? Do you long for the restoration of waters and the earth and the air? What is your deep, deep longing? As for me, my deep longing is the thing that moves me out into the world. My deep longing is what gives purpose to my life and meaning to my days. I know myself well enough to know that if I just listen to the part of me that is anxious and scared of being rejected and hurt, if I only listen to the parts of me that prize security over courage, I don't think I could do ministry very well. The other day, I was waiting at the elevator to go to the hospital cafeteria. It was my lunch break, and I was off during that 30-minute time, and I didn't really have to talk to anybody. But there was a lady standing next to me, and my soul led me. My soul pulled me, and I asked her, "Do you have someone, a loved one here at the hospital?" She said, "Yes. He just had surgery to remove cancer." And I asked another question, and she talked for longer than she probably had planned. And we stood there for quite a long time. It was a very simple encounter, but it was surprising. It was deep, and it was transforming for both of us. We hugged each other as we said goodbye. I finally went off to my lunch, and I felt free. That's what spiritual freedom feels like. Like I have satisfied the deepest longing of my soul. I am imperfect in my practice of spiritual freedom because practicing freedom, satisfying the soul, involves overcoming a lot of human hurdles. My soul longs for wonder and beauty in everything I see, and yet busyness gets in the way. The headlong tumble into the next moment, as the poet describes, causes me to miss opportunities to really connect with people, the people right in front of me. Fear, shame, guilt, grief all cause me to forget that I want to bring joy and love into every relationship that I have. But when I am awake enough, I can feel the rightness of the moment, and my soul is truly satisfied. As Francis David languished in that prison cell, his mind was on us. He was thinking about us, the ones who would inherit his spiritual legacy. He wanted us to be free from orthodoxy so that we could find the permanent and the universal truths, so that we could listen to the longing of our souls, the echo of God that urges us to greater love, that urges us to create a more just society and deeper connections with the spirit of life. May it be so.
Yo, yo, yo. It's kind of a Hungarian rap song of sorts. Thank you. Welcome again to today's service. We're especially honored to have guests with us. Our members would love an opportunity to greet you after the service, and so that we might be able to do so. If you are visiting, would you please raise your hand and keep it up? Wow. Hold your hands high just a moment. Members, take a look around. Notice guests who are seated near you, and make sure they get a personal invitation to join you for coffee and conversation in Freeman Hall following the service. Should it enhance your experience of future services, you can find both a large print order of service and a hearing assistance device on the table at the entrance to the sanctuary. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out a yellow card. You'll find them along with offering envelopes on the clipboards at the end of your rows. Please begin passing those clipboards down your rows now. Members with a life event can indicate that on the reverse side of the card. Place your completed yellow cards in the offering basket when they're passed in just a few moments. Some returning visitors may be interested in hearing about how to become a member. If so, talk with our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. She's standing in the rear of the sanctuary. Kelly's contact information is on the back of your order. Again, to each of you, welcome. Our day continues after this in Freeman Hall. It's information in your order. It's the next installment of Operation Sandwich for families, kids, for anyone who would like to participate. At 1:30, Kathleen Carpenter, our Director of Religious Education for Children and Youth, and I will be leading a session on gender identity, especially for parents with kids in our Whole Lives program, our comprehensive sexuality program this afternoon, but anyone is welcome to attend. There's information also in your order about a new adult religious education spiritual development offering that's coming up beginning this Tuesday, called Nurturing a Spiritual Base for Activism. You need to sign up if you want to be a part of that. There's information in the order about how to do that. Go to the adult programming table in Freeman Hall. If you're a member in this past week's issue of our e-newsletter Currents, you saw information that our environmental transformation team is coordinating our participation on Tuesday afternoon and evening in activity that will be held outside of the headquarters of Duke Energy. This is in response to their public request for comments on their proposed rate increase. Our environmental transformation team and our environmental justice core group are deeply concerned about this, and they invite you to join them at Duke Energy on Tuesday afternoon. Refer back to Currents for how to do so. We gather aware always that there are needs in the life of our congregation. We hold with love and remember in our prayers on this day Charlotte and Harvey Hammer. Charlotte has been hospitalized, is home now. Becky Whittington, who was hospitalized and is now home recovering. We remember with love and with sympathy on this day Tim Songer and Martha Knisley, our adult programming coordinator, and the death this week of Tim's mother. We recognize that there are others here in this room who feel a deep burden of need, of concern. This may be a day when you're celebrating or remembering. You're invited to come forward and light your own candle in just a few moments during the playing of the offertory, holding the silence, please, in the room during that time. I offer you this morning a meta practice.
meditation for loving kindness. And so if you want to make yourselves comfortable, work out any kinks you might have, you can close your eyes or just hold a soft gaze at some point, spot right in front of you. So first, focus on yourself. Say to yourself, may I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. Next, bring to your mind's eye the people who are closest to you, your family, your friends. Picture them in your mind and say to yourself, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. Now move on to the people who are your acquaintances, neighbors, the mailman, the Starbucks barista. Picture them in your mind. Say to yourself, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. And now bring to your mind strangers living far away, people you will never meet. Picture them in your mind and say to yourself, may they be happy. May they be well. May they be safe. May they be peaceful and at ease. Finally, bring to mind someone that you are having conflict with, someone that you're angry with, someone that you find it's difficult to extend compassion to. Picture them in your mind and say to yourself, may they be happy. May they be well. May they be safe. May they be peaceful and at ease.
For all of the reasons that state religion is a really bad idea, there's one incredible advantage to such a system. Funding is guaranteed. You never have to ask. One of the incredible advantages of our participation in free religion is that we get to support this. as generously as we possibly can. We will now both give and receive this morning's offering. I invite us now to lay claim on our free religion by affirming our faith together. Please rise in body and or spirit. This is the mission of our faith.
To teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands.
We come to that time in our service when our chalice will be extinguished.
The light it symbolizes, however, does not go out.
Rather, the light of our liberating religion goes now with each of us, in each of us.
Our long burning light is sustained in the fire of our individual and collective commitment.
Go now as light.
Bring freedom, love, hope, and light to all whom you meet. Please be seated.